Chapter 2. Discovery. Niil and the Marcellus couple sent a letter to Hydemith the very next day. They sent another one a week later, and then a couple more every week after that, each one containing more gruesome details of how Niil was being quote-unquote tortured, not to mention how he'd been revived from death to life at least twice. Of course, these stories were all made up, but Niil couldn't see how his dad would be able to tell. Soon, however, these waiting days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Still, Niil Terra never came for his son, nor did he respond to any letters. In the end, there was simply no point in writing again. Mira and Marcus, who were more concerned about this than Niil was, took up their cloaks and went back to Akron to look for his dad. "We couldn't find him," Marcus said when they returned a few weeks later. "The house empty, crops dead. The neighbors said he moved a month ago." "But he couldn't have gone far," said Mira. "How could he, if he knows we're keeping you here?" To Niil, this question felt like a punch in the gut. Yes, how could he? How could his dad not come for him? How could he stay away when Niil was all that he had left? Marcus was next to him now, his hand on Niil's head. "We'll find him, don't you worry," he said, firmly patting him. "We're in this together now." All Niil could do was nod. And just like that, a year passed in Umbra. One foggy morning, Niil stood on the edge of the same misty gray shore where Mira and Marcus had brought him in their rocky boat. He was 12 now, no longer a child, but still small and frail looking for his age. From a distance, he could pass for a shrub, save for his cap of curly hair and clear amber eyes. The island of Umbra was still as bleak and colorless as ever. The same pale dust was still covering the land like snow, the same eerie silence and the stench of rot so thick it settled inside his nostrils. All sorts of insects swirled around him, but Niil let them swirl. In fact, he barely noticed them anymore. The stench, the bugs, the ash, it had all become a part of his world. Niil plopped onto a chunky boulder, the drawstring bag settling heavily before him. He untied it quickly, pulling out his tools. His trusty trowel, a broken hand rake he'd found in the trash, and a makeshift watering can made from a tin bucket. They weren't much to look at, scratched and dinged up from constant use, but they had been his partners through everything this past year. He looked up at the field beside him, a grin tugging at his lips. It was all his. Every stalk of corn, leafy vegetable, and towers of bean plants stood in neat rows, swaying slightly in the breeze. It would be a few more weeks before the corn was plump, the beans ripe, and the vegetables ready to pick, but the sight of their steady progress made his chest swell with pride. And then, in the small corner of the field, were his rain lilies. Silvery flowers that only bloomed in the rain, the kind his mom had loved so dearly and kept planting alongside their crops. He wondered what his mother, the master grower, would say if she saw his garden now. Besides, growing them hadn't been easy. Umbra's ashen dirt fought him every step of the way, and he'd gone through countless homemade fertilizers before the first shoots appeared. Now, he reached out, brushing a closed bud with his fingertips. Soft, delicate, alive. A small miracle in a place like this. "Niil!" a voice called out. He glanced up to see Marcus striding toward him, heavy boots crunching against the dusty ground. Marcus stopped a short distance away, frowning as he spotted Niil wrist-deep in dirt. "Back at it again, kid." "Niil, you know you don't have to do all this," Marcus said, shaking his head. "We didn't bring you here to put you to work." "It's just for fun," Niil replied with a shrug, brushing dirt off his hands. "And I'm good at it." He gestured proudly to the field around him. "Look." Marcus raised an eyebrow and glanced around the field. His expression shifted as he took in the neatly organized rows of crops. "Huh, you're not kidding," he said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "You really do have a green thumb. I've never seen this field look so packed. What's that over there?" "Lemongrass. It helps keep the mosquitoes away." "And those look like strawberries. In hammocks?" Niil grinned at Marcus's puzzled expression. "Well, Castor told me the berries take up a lot of the bad stuff from the ground. I thought this way they would stay clean and dry." He showed him the net cradling the berries. "They're comfy for now. Besides, happy strawberries taste better." "Do they now?" Marcus chuckled, but then his gaze shifted to the far corner of the field. His smile faltered, and a sudden strange look crossed his face. "And that?" "Those are rain lilies." Marcus shook his head, his frown deepening. "Yeah, I know what they are," he said. "I just didn't expect to see them here. Don't they bloom only when it rains?" "Yeah, they're special," Niil said. "And as my mom used to say, the darker the sky, the brighter they appear." Marcus's gaze lingered on the rain lilies for a moment longer before he stepped back, clearing his throat. "Anyway, just try not to overwork yourself, all right? If Mira finds out you've been farming like this, I'll never hear the end of it." Just then, Castor's voice broke the quiet as he strode toward them. "Marcus," he called. His gaze shifted to Niil, and he flashed a broad grin. "Hey, Niil, you're here again. Wow, look at these crops." He gave Niil a quick high five, his eyes wide as he scanned the field. "This looks amazing." Tall, cheerful, and with a voice as soothing as a lullaby, Castor had been the first friend Niil made when he arrived on the island. Though he was 7 years older, Niil didn't mind. Castor was the kindest person he'd ever met. Even the farm animals liked him and followed him wherever he went. But Castor's grin faded quickly, replaced by a serious expression as he turned back to Marcus. "We've got trouble. Can you come over?" Marcus straightened, his tone sharp. "What kind of trouble?" "Better if you see it for yourself," Castor replied, already turning back the way he came. They started walking to the basin, where a group of islanders stood along the edge, digging a deep trench like busy little ants. Niil's stomach seized when he took in a whiff. Oddly white and bubbling like a thick, steamy soup, the basin was full of toxins and concentrated rot. Castor pointed to a crevice where a large olive tree had fallen. "It's about that trench you started us on. We're having some trouble pulling that tree out of the way. If we want to dig a proper trench, it'll need to go." "Why not just hack away some of the roots still connecting the tree to the ground?" Marcus asked. "We would," Castor said, scratching his head. "But the area's full of rocks, and the roots are wedged deep. It's too tight for most of us. Should we build a wall instead?" "No, that won't work," Marcus said firmly. "Building that will take too long, and it's too risky with the rain. Let's widen this space so we can get in there and clear it properly. If just one section gives out, the toxins could spill over and flood the village." "You're right," sighed Castor. "We don't want that happening again." The toxins. The hateful word made Niil turn to the ugly structure perched on the small mountain like a dead bird. From what he'd learned in the past year, Umbra used to be a mine for Enarii, a valuable liquid metal that only people from Caput Mundi could afford because of its high price. But Enarii mining was dangerous, and some freak accident some years ago caused an explosion which sent all sorts of chemicals down from the mines and into the land, poisoning everything and leaving behind a pool of toxic muck. He remembered how Sesto, one of Castor's goats, had fallen into the basin. Even now it made Niil's toes curl to think about the agonizing sounds it made before it met its grim fate. "The thing is, everyone's got their plates full," Castor said, his voice trailing off as he glanced at the workers along the trench. And with the rain season just around the corner, time's not exactly on our side. Maybe we can just work around this section? I'll do it, Niil said. Both Marcus and Castor turned to him, eyebrows raised. Kid, this isn't like digging in your garden, Marcus said, his tone skeptical. It's tough work, and you'll need some muscle. I know, Niil replied, meeting Marcus's gaze. But you need someone small, right? I can fit in there. In fact, I'm probably the only one. Castor exchanged a doubtful glance with Marcus, scratching his head. Marcus sighed but gave a faint smile. All right, but you're calling for help if anything goes wrong. Got it? Got it, Niil said, already moving toward the tree. With Marcus's help, Niil climbed carefully down the craggy pit, his boots slipping slightly on the damp earth. The air grew heavier with every step, and as he expected, the mud there stank like a corpse. He gagged, his stomach twisting. You okay down there? Marcus called from above. Yeah, all good, Niil replied, though he already regretted not bringing a mask. But it'd be better if I didn't have to talk. He turned his focus back to the tree, hacking at the roots with as much force as he could muster. His shovel sank into the blackened wood, sweat dripping down his face as he worked, only for it to mix with the swarm of mosquitoes that had begun to buzz around him. The roots were rotted black to the center, yet the tree seemed anchored in the earth, holding on to its dear life. Niil's arms burned with the effort, but he gritted his teeth, determined to finish this. Just then, a strange tingling sensation suddenly came over him, and he threw down his gloves, sure that bugs had managed to crawl inside. He held up his hands in the light, but there wasn't anything on the back of his hands, nor on his palms. But then, what could it be? The feeling was still there. It was a tingling, prickling sensation that reminded him of when he'd gotten frostbite and Mira made him dunk his hands in warm water. Then he saw it. Trickling down from the earth was a dark, metallic liquid. It was beautiful, whatever it was, fluid, airy, and intensely black. Everything about it burned into Niil's senses, and his whole body began to tickle and itch as though he'd jumped into a bed of goose feathers. Carefully, he took his shovel and prodded it, but it went through the liquid like air. His heart started to race as he approached it, and something incredible happened. The liquid rose and came to him almost as though it was carried by an invisible hand. Then it hung in the air like a light, silken feather. Without thinking, Niil reached for the liquid. As soon as his fingertips grazed the silky light surface, a sigh escaped his lips. His mind went blank as he held it, a strange, familiar feeling that sent a strange warmth throughout his hands and feet. It settled on his palm, thick and smoldering, and the liquid began to sway side to side like a caterpillar on its hind legs. Niil couldn't believe what he was seeing. Was it alive? He clambered out of the ground to find Marcus and Mira helping the other villagers dig their trench. Look, he said, running to them. Guess what I found? As they turned to him, their eyes immediately locked onto the black liquid gleaming on his palms. Their smiles faded. Neat, isn't it? Even as he spoke, the thing on his hand was whirling and jiggling. It was quite lovable. So lovable he wanted everyone on the island to see it. Marcus stared at it for a long moment. Where did you find that? It wasn't his usual easygoing voice. Inside that pit, said Niil. Swerving on the spot, his muscular arms suddenly rigid, Marcus asked Old Man Rhine, the village chief, to follow him to where Niil had found the mysterious liquid. What's wrong, Marcus? The old man asked. His jaws dropped fast, however, when he squinted and found the puddle of black liquid inside the hole in the ground. Is that what I think it is? He said shakily. But how is it down there? There must have been a leak, Marcus said, his blue eyes tracing a thin and deep crack running from the pit to the base of the mountain. You mean from there? Said Ryan. No other place I can think of. Been a while since one of us went to check. Mira let out a heavy sigh. You're probably right. The other islanders joined them one by one. First Castor, and then Noor, the toolsmith. All of them jumped back when they saw what was inside the pit. So what should we do? Asked Ryan to Mira and Marcus. Should we go now and seal it up? Mira turned to the sky. A faint shadow cast over her beautiful face. She looked suddenly more aged. No, she said. We need to focus on digging this trench. That's right, agreed Marcus. There's nothing we can do about it now. Besides, we've known all along it would happen. We'll just have to tell people not to touch. Then he got sight of Niil and the black liquid churning in his palms like a miniature whirlpool. There was a hush as Ryan and the others looked from Marcus to the thing on Niil's hand. Give that to me, said Marcus. Niil held the liquid closer. Why? What is it? Nothing. But it would have been more convincing if Marcus hadn't been hurrying to seize it. Just toxic garbage, like the rest of them. And what on earth were you doing with your gloves off? Haven't we told you? But I'm fine. It isn't doing anything. Marcus grimaced. It might be if you hold it for long. It came to me, like it was alive. Look, Niil, I don't have time to explain. Then let me keep it for a while. He knew he was being stubborn, but for some reason he couldn't let it go. It needed him. It was the only thing that seemed to cling to him. It doesn't work like that. Come on. No! Niil didn't know what happened next, or how it happened. Marcus made to jump at Niil again when suddenly the liquid in his hands bubbled violently, then shot up like an angry tornado. It spun so fast that it knocked over a tool cart by his feet and shattered a water barrel into about 100 pieces. It's out of control, Mira cried as Castor called out Niil's name. Nono the goat broke free from her leash and fled. Old Man Ryan told everyone else to step back. Let go of it, came Marcus's voice. But Niil couldn't. He yelped as the black liquid continued to rampage, sending other tools and barrels flying in high arches that put rainbows to shame. Right then, Mira swooped in, striking Niil's hand with so much force that it sent the liquid splattering all over the ground. Mira, said Niil. There were black puddles everywhere. His heart lurched when he saw something slick and red glistening on Mira's throat. Old Man Ryan asked for the medicine box, but Mira held a hand. It was an accident, said Niil, shaking. I didn't mean to. If you hadn't... But he lost all his words when Mira turned to him. Are you hurt? She asked. Her eyes were steady. Niil shook his head. Good. And as he stood there speechless, Marcus put a hand on his shoulder and told him to wait for them back in the house. Niil left quietly.